Thanks so much for joining us today. Before we get into our episode, why don't you take a few moments to subscribe to my newsletter on Substack? It's a great way to stay connected with the show. I know we didn't make any newsletter editions this week, but we'll be back next week with more coverage of some of the big topics, because right now is not a time to be really missing out on. And you can also follow me on Instagram. Find me on Instagram at Real Ishan Shrivastava, and I'm also on Blue Sky. You can find me at ishanshrivastava.bluesky.social. All right, let's get into it. So we know it's not like a crazy unknown fact that Donald Trump has a bit of a complicated relationship with the law. He has a very fluid relationship, if we want to say that. Of course, personally, and also in his presidency so far. Personally, of course, we know that he has been convicted of 34 felony charges. He was found liable for the E. Jean Carroll case. He also had different investigations spanning Georgia, Manhattan, and from the Justice Department. Of course, none of those things are going to yield any actual tangible results anymore now that he's president. But he has a personally complicated relationship with the law. But also, we are starting to see that he has a somewhat complicated relationship with the law as a governing president. Like, his administration has a complicated relationship. Now, why do I say that? Well, I say that because in general, what I have seen, and I think what you've all seen, because if you're watching the show, I'm sure you are plugged in to the news as well, is the interesting line that this administration seems to be treading when use of the Justice Department, when use of the law, when it comes to court orders, which in some cases they are openly ignoring, when it comes to how they interpret how the law should be looked at, or when it comes to blatantly just not following the law. It's all there. And so obviously Trump has had that relationship on a personal level, but we're also seeing that from his administration. Insert Kristi Noem. Now, we covered Kristi Noem back when she was a governor here on the show. That's the last time I really talked about her. We covered her in our first edition of Meet the Trump Administration. She was the first episode, and we talked about some of her background. So Kristi Noem, of course, some of the stories that we have on her are how she admitted to shooting her own dog in her memoir, or how she faked a meeting with Kim Jong-un in her memoir, how she handled the COVID-19 pandemic, or how she was kind of, bullying her way through the South Dakota Department of Labor to get a real estate license. It's a very interesting story, and I really suggest you go check it out. It'll probably be linked somewhere in this video. But anyway, that was Kristi Noem. We were covering her back when she was a governor. She had just been nominated as Trump's nominee for Secretary of Homeland Security. That's a big, big job, huge job. Important stuff. And ideally, I say ideally, we want someone to be Secretary of Homeland Security that knows what they're doing. They're obviously not a policy expert. They don't have to be all knowing about everything. But you want a smart person. You want someone that actually knows how the mechanics of the Constitution work. You want them to know what their job is actually supposed to do. Okay. Well, Secretary Noem, now that she was confirmed after that episode, so she's since become Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. She's spent much of her tenure in the Department of Homeland Security in a really interesting way. I would say maybe through games of dress up. Here's some pictures. You can see that sometimes she likes to cosplay as a Border Patrol agent. She likes to pretend she goes on her little raids. She'll go on raids and then completely broadcast it. Sometimes she'll become a cowboy. Sometimes she'll go to prisons and speak with a backdrop of people whose heads have been shaved and are now all packed into a single cell as a propaganda video. She is producing ads praising President Donald Trump. I mean, I think of all the people that Trump has nominated to his cabinet, and I'm including people like Pete Hegseth and Mike Waltz, who's now the UN ambassador nominee. I'm including all of these people. I think out of all of them, Kristi Noem has probably had the most fun in her new job. Obviously, in her little games of dress up, she's keeping herself busy doing all the fun stuff that I guess she thinks is being Homeland Security Secretary. I mean, but in reality, the job of Homeland Security is not playing dress up, not cosplaying. It's not being in ads. Like, it's actually being responsible for the security of the homeland, making sure that we are safe. And some of that has to do with they also oversee immigration. So obviously, this administration has been in more legal hot water because of immigration, such as openly defying a Supreme Court mandate to bring back Kilmar Abrego Garcia. It doesn't matter how you feel about it, the Supreme Court has said something, and the Trump administration decided that it doesn't care. There's this new report that we're seeing about Kristi Noem and the game show she is planning, openly at least talking about. There are reports, obviously, you can see from organizations like the Wall Street Journal and NBC News talking about a legitimate game show, reality television, because obviously people in this country will watch anything on TV, according to them. So let's make a game show for immigrants. She's really having a fun time on the job. That's what I'll say. She's having a really fun time, and she's enjoying herself. So in the latest Kristi Noemism, we'll start branding it as that, Kristi Noemism, she was on Capitol Hill yesterday on May 20th, testifying in front of the Senate Homeland Security Government Affairs Committee, talking about the 2026 budget. Obviously, Congress is in budget season right now, and maybe we'll cover it in a future episode because that's also an interesting topic. But she was over there talking about her budget, but she was asked a question, and it had to do with this thing called habeas corpus. It's a very important concept. It's okay if you don't know what that is, but ideally, you should expect the Secretary of Homeland Security to know what habeas corpus is. Take a look at this exchange with Senator Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire and Secretary Noem. They're talking about what habeas corpus is, just habeas corpus in general. Take a look.
So, Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to.
Let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President Lincoln used it.
There's a little hope. Your Secretary of Homeland Security doesn't know what habeas corpus is. Look, habeas corpus is not the president's right to remove anyone he wants from the country. Actually, it's quite the contrary. I'm going to put up the Britannica, official Britannica dictionary definition. Take a look at this. Habeas corpus is defined as, quote, in order to bring a jailed person before a judge or court to find out if that person should really be in jail. So, habeas corpus means that you cannot be arbitrarily arrested. It does not mean that they can pluck you off the street, which is something that has been happening with some people at least. It does not mean that the law is disrespected. It means that in America, we actually have a system of justice and we have a system of laws. And so it's enshrined in our Constitution that habeas corpus exists, that you will be brought before a judge to know why you have been detained, why you've been arrested, and whether or not you should actually be arrested. So when the Secretary of Homeland Security cannot explain this constitutional thing, I guess it's kind of a commentary on civics in this country, civic education. I mean, look, I used to teach government class. I used to teach people exactly about habeas corpus, like the right to be brought before a judge. Like that's a thing I taught, and the students, they struggled with it because it's a niche concept. It's not like the articles of the Constitution or like, I don't know, the Congress. It's not like how a bill becomes a law. Like there's not a Schoolhouse Rock video on habeas corpus, but it is so important, and it's what makes this country a country. And it makes us different from countries like Russia or North Korea, where they can just pick you off the street and put you in a, I don't know, in like a penal colony like they did to Alexei Navalny. This is what makes America a country of freedom. But Senator Hassan explains it better than I do. Take a look at her and what she said.
Excuse me. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires that the government provide a public reason for detaining and imprisoning people. If not for that protection, the government could simply arrest people, including American citizens, and hold them indefinitely for no reason. Habeas corpus is the foundational right that separates free societies like America from police states like North Korea. As a senator from the live free or die state, this matters a lot to me and my constituents and to all Americans. So Secretary Noem, do you support the core protection that habeas corpus provides, that the government must provide a public reason in order to detain and imprison someone?
Yeah, I support habeas corpus. I also recognize that the President of the United States has the authority under the Constitution to decide if it should be suspended or not.
It has never
Let
been,
us be clear, though,
it has
that this
never
president,
been done. It has never been done without approval of Congress. Even Abraham Lincoln got retroactive approval from Congress.
She said it better than I could. Habeas corpus is something that can be suspended, but it needs to get the okay from Congress. The president can't just lift habeas corpus. It's just not how that thing works. It's been lifted during the Civil War. It was lifted during World War II for Japanese internment. Like, and you know, that's a whole other can of worms. I don't think it's necessarily the best thing that happened. I don't think it's a good thing that happened. But habeas corpus has been revoked a very limited number of times. There is no good reason for this administration to even be flirting with the idea of lifting it now. We're not in those types of situations. We're not in a civil war. We're not in the middle of an invasion, as they like to say. We are in a country where the laws should be respected. I don't know if that's necessarily happening. So anyway, that's Kristi Noem. She obviously does not know what habeas corpus is, and that's a little disappointing, and I don't know, makes me feel a little less elated, but that's okay, whatever. Secretary doesn't know what that is, whatever. Here's another story that I'm looking at in terms of the Trump administration's complicated relationship with the justice system. This has to do with Representative Lamonica McIver. So on May 9th, Lamonica McIver, the Congresswoman from New Jersey, as well as just a delegation of members of Congress and the mayor of Newark, Ras Baraka, were all involved in this confrontation outside a New Jersey immigration detention facility. This is in Newark. You know, it was a tense moment, like there was chaos that was going on there. And at the end of all of it, the interim U.S. attorney for the state of New Jersey, Alina Habba, President Trump's lawyer who lost the E. Jean Carroll case, and also a renowned parking garage counsel, who is now also the interim U.S. attorney. What a resume. She charged Mayor Ras Baraka. That was eventually lifted, so they got rid of that. But just this week, the Justice Department charged Representative McIver, a sitting member of Congress, on 2 counts of assaulting and resisting and impeding federal officials during an incident. They are claiming that she assaulted police officers, Homeland Security officials, and they are suggesting that she resisted the orders of them when she went to investigate what was going on. Here's some things you should know. As a member of Congress, Representative McIver has every right to go to a ICE detention facility without an appointment. Members of Congress are allowed that right. They are allowed to go in. They are allowed to inspect. It is their job, actually, when you look at it. It's congressional oversight over the executive branch. It is her job to go check these ICE facilities. And so she was exercising her right. Was Ras Baraka allowed to be there? I don't know. Maybe there's like some argument to be made that he wasn't allowed to be there. But Representative McIver had every right to be at that facility and investigating and did not have to give any notice of anything because she's a member of Congress. Now, the Homeland Security Secretary and Department under Kristi Noem decided that, no, they're not going to do that. They're not going to, not Homeland Security, the Justice Department, and specifically the New Jersey district under Alina Habba decided that they are not going to respect the rule of law in this country. And so they decided to charge Representative McIver. Now, there has been criticism that this is a politically motivated attack on Representative McIver. And if you want to look at it that way, maybe. Because if you look at the video, she is not assaulting anyone. She is getting pushed around in the crowd. Like, that is what is happening. She's getting pushed around in a crowd. And it seems like this administration is trying to charge a sitting member of Congress to intimidate people, to show people that they are not afraid to do this. Now, traditionally, when a sitting member of Congress is charged, or if you're charging someone with a crime, it goes through this thing in main justice, like in the actual Justice Department, Department of Justice. It goes through an office called the Public Integrity Section. This is an apolitical component of the Justice Department. And basically, this part of the Justice Department is tasked with making sure that any charges brought against elected officials are not politically motivated. They don't have biases of politics. And, you know, the charges against Mayor Eric Adams, obviously very dubious stuff with Turkey are being alleged. Senator Bob Menendez, who had also really questionable, shady things going on in terms of bribery. And of course, everyone's favorite, former Representative George Santos, who has a whole litany of things. All of them, their charges went through the Public Integrity Section to make sure that the prosecutors that were bringing these charges were not politically motivated in their attacks on them. And obviously, they did a lot of weird, heinous things. But even they got that right. Representative McIver's charge completely bypassed. And it's no coincidence that Trump is also trying to get rid of this part of the Justice Department. Maybe it's a sign that maybe they want to charge more people in the future. But I don't know. I don't know what they want to do. I don't know why they would want to intimidate members of Congress like this. Maybe it's because they don't want people speaking out against them. Maybe they're saying, if you speak out against us, we'll charge you with a crime. We'll charge you with an exaggerated thing that you did not do or were not responsible for. Anyway, so the Justice Department has charged Representative McIver. They are investigating, at least, or whatever. Now, when they did this with Mayor Ras Baraka, remember that charge was dropped. And it was only after they went to court, they had a court thing, and they went to court, and the judge dropped it. Here is, again, interim U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, Alina Habba, going to the courtroom. Listen to the crowd as that greeted her as she went in. Take a look.
Us, and now we're showing up for him.
Clearly, people were not happy. People were not very happy about all of that. But that's another thing that is happening right now. The Justice Department is now investigating members of Congress, now charging members of Congress bypassing the public integrity section. People like George Santos, people like Mayor Eric Adams got to go, they had the privilege of their cases going through this office to make sure that their charges weren't politically motivated, as much as they love to complain about it, even though they did, George Santos is going to jail for 82 months or what, something. It's 7 years, nearly 7 years. Like, even he got to go through it. So why is the Justice Department not letting Representative McIver get that same treatment? Two systems of justice in this country now? Isn't that what Trump basically spent 2 years complaining and whining about? Why is it fair that, he alleges everyone does it against him, but he won't do it for other people? I thought that justice was going to be fair in this country again. Okay. Anyway, here's another shady story, another complicated incident with the law, shall we? This has to do with the nation of Qatar, $400 million jet, and President Trump. So basically, the government of Qatar, a country in the Middle East known for funding groups that we are against, like Hamas, for example, they floated the idea of giving President Trump a Boeing 747 as a gift from the Qatari government. The idea is that they would take this $400 million jet and they would get to use it. They would get to keep, there's questions of maybe President Trump getting to keep this jet after he leaves office in 2029. It goes to his library. Okay, so it's a $400 million jet. Federal employees aren't allowed to get gifts more than $20. And here the president is openly, and they have officially accepted this gift, I should point out. This happened just before we started recording, but they've accepted this $400 million gift from the Qatari government. Now, why would the Qatari government, be so interested in giving the president a $400 million gift? I mean, I would love a $400 million gift. I don't think I would accept it. That's a lot of money. But President Trump obviously is okay with it, which is like, cool, good for you. You get a jet. But there's this thing called the Constitution in America. So I guess Secretary Noem should also, maybe her and President Trump can get a lesson in the Constitution. Actually, I should also point out that Secretary Noem is also interested in the $50 million jet. You get a jet, you get a jet, you get a jet. Everyone gets a free private jet. Anyway, Secretary Noem should get a lesson in the Constitution about habeas corpus. President Trump should get a lesson in the Constitution about this thing called the Emoluments Clause, which prohibits federal officials from seeking gifts from foreign governments without congressional approval. I mean, why is it that the Constitution, that the framers would not want the president or other federal officials accepting extravagant gifts from, foreign governments? I don't know. Maybe it's because you don't want them influenced by foreign governments. I don't know. Maybe you don't want them acting against U.S. interests because they're being influenced by foreign governments. I should, again, remind you that Qatar is known for funding groups like Hamas, like giving money to problematic groups, terrorist groups. This same country is gifting President Trump a $400 million jet. That's like really complicatedly problematic. Trump administration also does not like to note that the Trump organization, that's the company, the business, they have business dealings in Qatar right now that are pending some approvals, that are in the middle of their development, that are already happening. I don't know. There's other stuff going on in Qatar with Trump. So $400 million jet. Now, ideally, the Secretary of State should know about stuff with foreign governments. I mean, that's the job. Secretary of State is this guy, Marco Rubio, Secretary Marco Rubio. He used to be a U.S. Senator. And there was a lot of faith when he was picked to be Secretary of State that he would be this voice of reason. I don't know how much those hopes have lived up in the 6 months since he's been nominated to be Secretary of State and becoming Secretary. Take a look at this exchange between him and another hearing that also happened very recently.
Let me ask you about the one that is probably most confusing to this committee, which is the planned gift of a plane to either the United States government or the president. Is it your understanding that this luxury plane that Qatar has offered the president, and the president has announced he is willing to accept, is a gift to the United States government, or is it a gift ultimately to the president himself that he can use in his library?
Well, you'd have to talk to the Department of Defense, because this is a replacement or at least a temporary bridge plane for Air Force One, the new Air Force One, which is way off its delivery schedule. And so that would have to be with the Air Force. They operate Air Force One. My understanding of it basically has been from the very beginning that this is a plane that was identified after talking to Boeing about what other planes around the world would fit the bill that are out there that could be used now. They identified the ones the Qataris had as an opportunity for one, and as a result, or the UAE had that as opportunity for one, and that's how that deal was.
And it's not your understanding that the plane ultimately will belong to the president or to the president's library after.
Well, I'm not involved at that level of it. I've never heard that before. What I've heard is that plane will replace Air Force One, which is an Air Force plane.
Secretary Marco Rubio does not know about the president's dealings with a foreign government. Doesn't really have a lot of ideas about a jet. That's your Secretary of State. We have a Secretary of Homeland Security that doesn't know what habeas corpus is. We have a Secretary of Defense that likes to post war plans on Signal. And we have a Secretary of State that doesn't know the president's relationships with foreign governments. Welcome to the Trump administration. Anyway, those are some of the stories that we have covering right now. But that's what we have for today. If you liked my commentary, then follow me on social media, again, on Instagram at @realishan_Srivastava. You can find me on Blue Sky at ishanshrivastava.bluesky.social. You can subscribe to my newsletter using the little QR code or whatever on your screen and the link so that you never miss a beat and you can stay connected with the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks so much for keeping up with my random absences. I was sick. But I'll probably be back again very soon. I should be back on Saturday, I hope. But until then, thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you in the next one.